So you want to know the real deal about becoming a scientific laboratory technician.
Sounds like someone's got science on the brain.
We got your request for this deep dive
And we're ready to dissect it all.
from the day-to-day reality.
To how to stand out in what's probably a pretty competitive job market.
And to make sure we're not, just making stuff up.
We're diving deep into some sources you provided, right?
Yeah, excerpts from RoleCatcher's Career Guide.
And some additional info from their website.
They really seem to be everywhere these days.
They're trying to be the go-to for career advice, I guess you could say.
But before we get too caught up in the whole online career advice world,
Right.
let's talk about the actual work.
Yeah, good idea.
So imagine for a second you're a scientific laboratory technician. What are you actually doing all day?
Well, it's probably not as glamorous as some people might think.
Yeah.
It's not all about, like, those eureka moments.
Right.
But those moments, those breakthroughs,
Yeah.
they don't happen without someone doing the meticulous work behind the scenes.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's about being the backbone of those discoveries, really.
The unsung heroes of the science world.
You could say that, I guess.
So we're talking like conducting experiments, recording data super carefully.
Absolutely. And analyzing that data, making sure everything lines up, troubleshooting when it doesn't.
That sounds like it takes some serious attention to detail.
Oh, for sure. And a good dose of patience, too.
Definitely. And would you say, like, is there a lot of variety in this kind of work?
Oh, tons. I mean, think about it. Science covers a lot of ground.
That's true, yeah.
You could be analyzing DNA evidence in a forensics lab one day.
Whoa.
Or, if environmental science is your thing,
Yeah.
you could be studying how pollution affects water samples.
Interesting. So what would that look like, actually doing that kind of analysis?
Well, you'd be using a bunch of different techniques, things like chromatography.
Chromatography, okay. Now, for those of us who haven't been in a lab since, like, high school, what does that even mean?
Basically, it's a way to separate mixtures. So you're figuring out what individual components are in a sample.
Ah, okay.
Like, imagine figuring out the exact recipe for your favorite snack, but on a molecular level.
Now, that's a kind of science I can get behind.
Right.
So it seems like you don't have to be stuck in one specific area.
Not at all.
But the guide mentions needing a bachelor's degree in a related field.
Yeah, that's pretty standard these days.
Makes sense.
It gives you that foundation you need.
Right. But beyond the textbook stuff,
Mm-hmm.
are there, like, other skills that would make a lab technician really stand out?
Oh, absolutely. I'd say, like, one of the biggest ones is critical thinking.
Okay.
Right.
More than just knowing the steps to follow them.
Exactly. It's about being able to troubleshoot when things go wrong,
Yeah, because experiments don't always go according to plan.
Exactly. And sometimes you have to think on your feet to figure out what's going on.
So being able to, like, adapt and think outside the box is just as important as having all that technical knowledge.
100%. And don't discount soft skills either.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, you're not just working solo in a lab, right?
It's a team effort, usually.
Exactly. You got to be able to communicate your findings effectively.
Oh, that makes sense. So other scientists can build on your work.
Exactly. It's all about collaboration.
Right.
Science is rarely a solo endeavor.
And that's actually something that RoleCatcher emphasizes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What do they say?
They talk about how networking is, like, key for breaking into this field.
That makes sense.
Things like, going to conferences.
Yeah.
Joining professional organizations, connecting with people already working in labs.
It's all about building those connections.
It's kind of like that saying.
What's that?
It's not always what you know, but who you know. Although in this field.
What you know is definitely important too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say you've aced your interview.
Okay.
You've totally wowed them with your knowledge of, what was it again?
Chromatography.
Chromatography, yes.
Mhm.
But everyone else who's applying for this job probably has similar skills, right?
Right.
So how do you really stand out?
That is the million-dollar question.
Especially with resources like RoleCatcher making it easier for everyone to, put their best foot forward.
Well, one thing that can really set you apart is specialization.
Ah, like becoming an expert in a specific area.
Exactly. The job market for lab technicians is expected to grow by 7% in the next few years, which isn't bad.
Right.
But some areas within science, booming, like take genetics or environmental science, for example. If you can find your niche, become the go-to person for a specific type of research.
Yeah.
Your skills are going to be in high demand.
So it's kind of like, specializing in medicine.
Exactly.
Like instead of being a general practitioner, you become a heart surgeon or...
Neuroscientists specializing in, say, Alzheimer's research.
Yeah. So you were saying something about how RoleCatcher can help with this whole specialization thing?
Oh, right. Their AI resume builder.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, actually. It analyzes job descriptions in your field.
Oh.
And then, it helps you tweak your resume.
To be sure you're highlighting the skills that those specific employers are looking for.
Exactly. It's like having a secret weapon for your job search.
I like the sound of that. Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this and they're totally sold.
Okay, great.
They want to become a scientific laboratory technician. What's next?
Time to hit the books.
Well, and the labs eventually.
Right. But what's the long game here? Can you make a real career out of being a lab technician?
Definitely. It's not just like an entry-level stepping stone.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, some people use it that way, of course.
Yeah, makes sense.
But you can absolutely build a lifelong career as a scientific laboratory technician if you want to.
So what would that look like, practically speaking?
Well, think about it. You might start out as an entry-level technician, learning the ropes, mastering those basic lab techniques.
Right.
And then as you gain more experience, you can move up to a senior technician role.
Okay. So more responsibility, maybe even managing other technicians.
Exactly. Designing experiments.
Mentoring junior staff, maybe even collaborating with scientists on, those big research projects.
So from analyzing data to shaping the direction of the research itself, that's pretty impressive.
Right. It's a lot more than just mixing chemicals. Although you do get to do some of that too.
Always a plus. But let's be real for a second. Every job had its downsides.
That's true.
What does RoleCatcher say about the potential downsides of this career path?
Let's see. They do mention that the work can get a little repetitive sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I can see that.
You might find yourself running the same test day after day, analyzing similar data.
Is the price you pay for being on the cutting edge of science, I guess. But are there any, actual risks involved in working in a lab environment? Right, good point. It's not all fun and games with test tubes.
Right.
The guide does mention potential exposure to hazardous materials as a downside.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But they also emphasize that, safety protocols are super important in this field.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you'd get tons of training on how to handle dangerous substances, how to use equipment properly.
So it's a controlled environment.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes me feel better. What about work-life balance?
That's a good question.
Because you always hear those stories about scientists working crazy hours in the lab.
Right. Well, the guide does say that lab technicians generally work full-time.
Okay.
And yeah, overtime's not uncommon, especially when deadlines are tight or experiments require extra attention.
So it's not always a 9-to-5 kind of gig.
Not always, no. Some labs even operate 24/7, which could mean irregular hours.
Something to keep in mind if you're thinking about this career path.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've talked about the pros and cons. Let's dig a little deeper into the career progression.
Oh.
RoleCatcher outlines various stages, right?
Yeah.
From entry level all the way up to principal scientific laboratory technician.
Right.
What are some of the key differences between those stages?
Well, at the entry level, you're mainly assisting those senior technicians, learning the ropes, mastering the basics. Think of it as paying your dues.
Right. Lots of observing, assisting, probably a fair share of washing glassware.
Exactly. But as you move into a junior technician role, you get more independence.
Oh.
You're conducting experiments on your own, analyzing data with less supervision.
Cool. So you get to actually do some real science.
Yeah, you get your hands dirty, so to speak.
So what comes after that initial taste of independence? So you start to get more responsibility, right? What comes after that junior technician role?
That's where you really step into a leadership position with the senior technician role. You're designing experiments, mentoring the junior staff, and really collaborating with the scientists on all those research projects.
So it's a lot more than just, following the instructions at that point.
Definitely. You're the go-to person. Your expertise is really valued at that level.
That's got to feel good.
I'm sure it does.
So you've moved up from mentee to mentor, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And you're helping shape the research direction rather than just, following the protocols.
That's a pretty amazing career trajectory.
Right.
But there's one more level, right? What's the top of the mountain for a scientific laboratory technician?
That would be the principal scientific laboratory technician.
Okay, so what do they do?
They're the ones who see the big picture. They're overseeing all the lab operations.
So thinking about budgets, regulatory compliance, all that.
Absolutely. They've worked their way up from mixing chemicals to, like you said, calling the shots.
That's pretty inspiring, actually. So it seems like each stage, as RoleCatcher outlines it, requires a pretty different skill set.
Oh, for sure. Like when you're just starting out, they really emphasize things like, attention to detail.
Right, being careful and precise.
Exactly. And having a strong work ethic, of course. But as you move into that senior technician role,
Yeah.
it's more about leadership experience,
Okay, makes sense.
being able to develop lab protocol, having a track record of successful collaborations.
It's almost like you're moving from like a purely scientific mindset to a more managerial one as you progress.
Yeah, you could say that.
Interesting. Well, we've talked a lot about RoleCatcher today.
They do seem to have a lot of resources for aspiring lab techs.
They really do. Just for anyone who might be tuning in for the first time, could you kind of sum up how RoleCatcher can be helpful in this field?
Sure. It's really like having a whole career toolkit at your fingertips. You can find job postings, of course,
Right.
but it's more than that. They have that AI resume builder we talked about.
Yeah, that was super great.
It analyzes job descriptions to help you highlight the right skills. Plus, they've got a whole library of interview questions specific to different scientific fields.
Oh, wow. And you can even practice your answers with their AI and get feedback, right?
Exactly. So, it's not a magic bullet,
Right.
but it can definitely give you an edge.
Totally. Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive, I have to say.
Me too.
We've gone from the nitty-gritty details of lab work all the way to the big picture of building a career in science.
It's amazing how much goes into bringing those scientific discoveries to life.
It really is. And we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the different skills you need to succeed, the challenges you might face.
And of course, how RoleCatcher can help you navigate it all.
Exactly. So for anyone listening who's feeling that spark of curiosity,
Yes.
that desire to maybe pursue a career in science,
Go for it.
maybe becoming a scientific laboratory technician is the perfect path for you.
It's a chance to follow your passion, make a real impact, and who knows, maybe even change the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.